Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. I'm your host, Brody Welch, and today we're going to be talking about something that I hope no one ever has to go through, and that's chemotherapy. But unfortunately, in our toxic world, it's very likely that you will know someone at some point who has to go through chemo. And yet there are ways of making this potentially really devastating experience to the body less harmful and perhaps even a positive one. My guest today is Lourie, who is a naturopath, acupuncturist, and homeopath. Carol attended the National College of Naturopathic Medicine and worked in community mental health, moved to California, became an acupuncturist, and opened the Natural Healthcare and Healing Center in Berkeley. She has always been interested in the treatment of complex disease and uses all of her skills for a mind-body approach towards recovering health. Carol, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here and share with your audience.
It's such an important topic. My father died of cancer of unknown origin back in 2007, and he had been a lifelong smoker, drinker. My only vegetable is tobacco. Not exactly a health nut, and all of his faith was in Western medicine. So it was really painful to watch someone that I cared about so deeply going through something that really, I really wished that he didn't have to spend his last months like that, because obviously when they couldn't find where it was coming from, chemotherapy was really just prolonging the inevitable. And instead of spending his last few months on the golf course, he was spending it every day in a hospital, getting weaker and weaker and more miserable, and was really at that point, just his mindset and his approach didn't really allow for much in the way of natural medicine or really any input from me or my other sister in the health field. And it was just so hard, because that obviously from our view as practitioners in natural medicine, we're not necessarily going after the cancer directly. We're about supporting the body as a whole to deal with whatever's coming at it, whether that's the cancer itself or with the treatment for the cancer. And that there's a lot of leverage that we actually do have in terms of how we can feel. So I'm really excited to learn, to have this episode be a valuable resource for anybody who knows anybody who's going through this or might someday have to go through chemo, to be able to get through it in as least a detrimental way as possible. I'd love to start off with what got you into this work.
Well, I always somehow believed that it was possible to feel better and to have a healthier, joyful life. And I was going to go to regular medical school, but I was living in a spiritual community in New York in the 70s, and my roommate had cancer. And I went with her to Memorial Sloan Kettering, and the doctor said, well, there's nothing more we can do for you. And she was in her 20s, and she somehow found this chiropractor who used iridology to do detoxifying diets. Now, this was in the 70s, before the word detox became a household word. Nobody had ever heard detox as a phrase in 1976. So she started going to this doctor and was spitting up mucus that had these black specks in it. And somehow she took it to a lab and found out that it was some residual from the chemotherapy that she had been given. And I became really fascinated, and because I was going with her to these natural doctor appointments, and it turns out that he needed an assistant, and I ended up working in his office. And when I first started working in his office, this young woman came in, and I'll never forget this. She had very bad cystic acne. And I'm standing there in my brain thinking to myself, why aren't you on antibiotics? You have bad skin, you take antibiotics. What's the big deal? Well, I was very naive when I was first introduced to the power of natural medicine. And she came back a couple months later her acne had dissipated, and she had lost weight, and she was just feeling restored and rejuvenated about her life and herself. And I saw cures like this in his office time and time again, people for whom the standard medical approach had failed or actually made them much worse. And everybody who came to see him and who was placed on these strange detoxifying diets recovered and got better. So as the spiritual path that we're all on would have it, my path, I was cleaning up this huge pile of unopened mail and all these envelopes, and there was a catalog to the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. And I thought, oh my goodness, maybe I should go here. And it was in Portland, Oregon. So that's how I ended up attending the National College of Naturopathic Medicine and becoming a naturopath instead of going to standard medical school, for which I'm very grateful to this day.
Yeah, that I can imagine just how transformative it must have been for you at that age to be seeing what's possible with natural medicine.
Yeah, it was a very rude awakening. Not only that, but how, I was, and as a lot of people are, as your dad it was, a firm believer in the power of regular medicine or allopathic medicine. And to see how it didn't fix all problems and how it could actually make some people in certain circumstances worse was a really big eye-opener for me. And I think that when you're undergoing care for something as complex as cancer, you need to be able to differentiate what parts of the recommended treatment are for you, and when do you want to seek another opinion, and how can you become the most empowered advocate for yourself working with your physicians during your care.
Such an important point. That just because a medicine is powerful doesn't mean that it has all the answers, whether we're talking about Eastern medicine or Western medicine or what, and being able to figure out what's right for you versus what's just a general guideline for all humans that may or may not apply.
Right.
Yeah. And so did you, did your early experience with your friend with cancer, did that influence making chemo an area of interest for you?
I've been in practice for over 30 years. So I think when you've been in practice for this long, your focus about what you're interested in becomes razor sharp. And just for a long time, I was having these people come to see me who were really complicated medical problems, and they'd seen a lot of different doctors, and they were still sort of sick. And I worked pretty intensely with them, and they were able to recover. Maybe not 100%, but at least better from where they were when they first came to see me. So I thought, maybe this is like an area that I really enjoy, and I'm successful when I work with people in this way. So I became in myself thinking, okay, I want to work with complex, complicated metabolic diseases. And with that, then I started studying with Donna Yance, who is the head of the Dietary Foundation in Ashland, Oregon. And he has a very specific approach towards treatment of all different types of cancers. But in my practice, I primarily see women with breast cancer and ovarian cancers. I do work with men, but the majority of people I work with in the cancer department have breast or ovarian cancer.
And what kind of support is available from a natural medicine perspective for people undergoing cancer?
Well, there's a lot. But
Yes.
first, I want to talk for a second about empowering yourself through the diagnosis, which is there are certain advanced tests that they can do for your tumor type that gives a lot of information. There's something called the Oncoblot. There's the Weisenthal. There's the Caris report, that's spelled CARIS. Now, a lot of oncologists or surgeons will not do a Caris report on a patient until they're stage 3. But from where I'm sitting, the information provided in this Caris report is critical for your future and current care. And I'll give a really clear example. I had a woman with breast cancer, and she underwent standard treatment with chemotherapy, and she failed chemotherapy, which means after, I think it was 3 months of chemotherapy, They did scans and everything, and the tumor had spread. So that's a treatment failure. So at that point, I got her oncologist to agree. She was having a mastectomy. We did a tumor sample and we sent it off for the Caris report. And it showed that she had certain biomarkers which were indicative of the fact that she would not respond well to chemotherapy.
Wow. So that really could have been, that whole chemo experience could have been avoided for her if she had
Exactly.
had this test in advance.
Exactly. And this is where being an empowered, informed person, and notice I don't like to use the word patient,
Yes,
because I think
right.
that is diminishing the person.
It's a mindset, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're just a patient, then you lose the rest of your humanity to your disease. And
Right.
that's not really like what we want to focus on at all.
Right. So being an informed, educated person who is going to take charge of their illness, whether it's cancer or diabetes or depression or PCOS or whatever, infertility, you need to find a physician who is going to respect your desires and work with you. And it is pretty standard in oncology care not to do a Caris report on the initial biopsy sample, but you can be insistent and find an oncologist or a surgeon who will work with you and really push for that, because that provided really important information for not only the fact that she failed chemotherapy, but moving forward, she has certain markers which will mean that she will not be responsive to tamoxifen. And she has certain genetic defects, which show that she needs a certain type of next cancer treatment. So this is like very serious for keeping people alive. And I know that in standard oncology, they have very specific protocols for this type of cancer. We do this type of chemotherapy, etc. But from my practice and the use of natural medicine, we want to individualize your treatment, whether it's for cancer or infertility or anything else. So, and the individualized perspective is one of the beauties of natural medicine from the Oriental Chinese perspective, as well as the naturopathic healthcare.
Absolutely. We treat individuals. We don't treat diseases. And
Right.
so it's really important to look at yeah. And that's actually, I believe, even becoming more something that's more accepted and standard in the practice of allopathic or Western medicine when it comes to the treatment of cancer, that they are looking deeper at.
Yes. I think that I'm hoping that the new generation of oncologists really begin to incorporate the principles of functional medicine, and that there become more integrative oncologists where the chemotherapy will be injected into the tumor as opposed to the entire body. I'm very optimistic about where we're heading in the next 50 years. I think it's going to be a very different scenario then than it is now.
Well, that's encouraging for sure. But for people who are dealing with it right now, I think it's such an important point of advocating for yourself and making sure that you get the tests like the Caris report that can be just pivotal in terms of what you choose to do on your cancer journey. What else can people do to empower themselves or to help themselves as they're undergoing chemo?
I think that the key word here, as you just said, is empower yourself. And I think it starts with an attitude, in an inner attitude, relationship, and approach towards your cancer. And the mind-body relationship is very important. I'm a big proponent of meditation. If you don't know how to meditate, there are really great apps. You can scroll around until you find meditation apps that will really guide you and help you in a positive way. The other thing I'd like to address is about chemotherapy. There's a lot of researchers in 2016, physicians Brandhurst and Longo did some research, and recently in 2017, O'Flanagan and Smith published an article called When Less is More, and it's about caloric restriction prior to chemotherapy. So in my practice, 5 days before somebody goes in for chemotherapy, we switch to a totally vegetarian diet. And then we start this process of emptying your intestines as if you are going in for a colonoscopy. And why do we want to do that? When you go into chemotherapy, there's a lot of chemicals placed in your body. And notice I'm not using the word toxins because that's not a positive perspective for chemotherapy.
Exactly right. No, you got to think about it as medicine.
Right. That's part of the meditation that we need to do, that this is a positive thing that I'm doing, and you want to envision it enveloping the cancer cells and them going by. But what happens with reducing your caloric intake by 20%, and these doctors did this research, that the cancer cells uptake the chemotherapy much more than the non-cancerous cells. So that's already super healthy for you. That makes a really big difference. And the cytotoxic effects of the chemotherapy are diminished. So
wow, that's huge.
It is huge.
So being able to protect yourself and make chemotherapy work better just by reducing your caloric input
by 20%.
By 20%.
For 3 days before you go.
And 20% isn't even all that much. Like that,
No.
that doesn't seem like a starvation diet to me. That seems like just being careful.
Well, like I said, 5 days before you want to become a vegetarian, and then 3 days before you want to cut out carbohydrates. So that means even if you're gluten-free, we're not doing any grains or crackers or cereals or sweets or potatoes. And that also includes cutting out sugar. And then on my website, I have a free download for something called a Beeler's broth. And it's this green vegetable soup that you make and cook, and then you put in the blender, and you drink that throughout 3 days before chemotherapy, and 3 days after. You want to reverse the order and before you start eating again. So you want to do backwards what you started 3 days before. And to go into chemotherapy with, and you'll know this as a fellow acupuncturist, ginger is one of the best herbs for decreasing nausea.
And really, it sounds like that whole protocol, we're getting the energetics of, you said it's a green broth, like so made with greens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're getting like the detoxifying, cooling energetics of the greens. We're cooking the food so that it is more easily digestible. And it's this light, that warm cooked and light is easy to digest. And so
Correct.
you're just like making it super simple for the body to handle everything that it's being asked to digest on all levels, right? Whether that's cellularly or whether it's in our digestive system. So that makes a lot of sense to me that would be a really smart thing to do.
Right. You want to remove the body's focus from your digestive system so it can focus on treating the chemotherapy getting in there, doing its job, and then the chemotherapy leaving your body as quickly as possible. Yeah. And so you want to stay super hydrated. And I have people make some ginger tea with fresh ginger and drink that a lot. And also green tea is a very good thing to drink, 3 to 5 cups a day. So the more you can drink to go into chemotherapy, not to go into chemotherapy extremely hydrated. And sometimes people say, I have difficult finding my veins. Well, that's due to dehydration often. But what my suggestion is, if it's really due to dehydration, is to take a teaspoon of salt, like kosher salt or organic salt, and put it into some warm water and dilute it, and then drink that water prior to chemotherapy. Because that will puff up, that salt will puff up your veins. Now, this is not for somebody who has high blood pressure problems, but with somebody who's having difficulty with their veins and it's a difficult thing to get the IV in and they do not have high blood pressure, this is a really good solution.
That sounds like a really simple, practical tip too.
Mm-hmm.
That, encouraging the veins to hang on to a little extra water. I want to take a moment to tell you about one of the most inspiring things in my life right now, my coaching group, Level Up. Our video calls are among the highlights of my week because people are regularly having breakthroughs, and not just things like losing weight or enjoying better energy and less pain, although those things are awesome, but changes that have very little to do with what we're ostensibly focused on. Our members are more confident in expressing themselves, finding their voices, drawing long overdue boundaries. They're feeling stronger and happier, clearer, and way more stress resilient. They move from a fixed to a growth mindset, like Diana, who writes, "Deep down, I really didn't believe I could change. After all, nothing I had tried had worked in the past. Now I know better. I'm happier and more confident. I'm way more kind to myself. Less negative self-talk and perfectionism. I'm treating myself with the same compassion I readily give others, which has made a huge difference in my outlook on life. Level Up is the real deal. It works." Another member of mine who wanted to feel more calm and confident, which she'd literally been working on for decades, told me, "Nothing has stuck until now." This course is a transformation incubator that is so remarkable and effective that not one but two members from the last round gifted their friends an entire year's membership because they wanted those friends to be part of this circle of support and true community. It's an incredible group of conscious people who are serious about doing things differently, upgrading their nourishment, getting stronger, trading stress for ease, and most importantly, living in alignment with the person they know themselves to be. If you want in, it's time to take action because spots are limited. Head over to the Level Up page at brodywelch.com and apply. Now back to the show. Do you use acupuncture much in terms of helping people mitigate side effects?
Oh, I am an acupuncturist and I love acupuncture.
Yes.
I think acupuncture is a gift from, I don't know how it came to our beings like 5,000 years ago, but I think it is such a gift. And I think acupuncture is a miraculous treatment methodology, and I use it on everybody that I see.
I have some experience working with people with cancer. I feel like too many proportionally, but that in terms of seeing what acupuncture can do in terms of decreasing nausea, of decreasing neuropathy, of as well as just keeping. I find it incredibly supportive just for the body, mind, spirit connection, helping people continue to feel positive and optimistic as they're going through cancer treatment. I'm curious if, just since you obviously have much more experience in this area than I do, what kinds of benefits you see, like why someone undergoing cancer would want to have yet another appointment to go to.
I know that's, that is one of the problems, that people just feel like they don't have a life. They're just going from appointments to appointments. So my suggestion is, like, if you have to do a standard medical appointment, the next appointment is a nourishing appointment. So you self-nourish with acupuncture or massage. And as you just said, I think that one of the most important components of acupuncture is that it has the ability to attend to the spirit on a very deep level. And it's very easy to sink into the despair mode, or I don't really like using this word, but as opposed to feeling empowered, the victim mode. And your mental health and your approach towards treatment and your illness have a very important part of how you will proceed during treatment and after active treatment. So in addition to the neuropathy and maybe constipation or any of the potential side effects that happen with chemotherapy, I think acupuncture attends to the spirit in a way that is just miraculous.
I think that's just such an important point, what you said about letting there be a kind of a yin and yang of your treatment plan. So yes, go and have a medical appointment, but then also go and take care of yourself in a nourishing way, something that can help your body, mind, and spirit all stay strong, because that's so critical. I want to roll back to what you mentioned too about the ginger and the green tea. So ginger, wonderful anti-inflammatory, wonderful anti-nausea, can help with stimulating appetite if that's an issue. Green tea, I know, has been studied and shown to cause apoptosis, or causing cancer cells to kill themselves in certain kinds of cancer. I know there's been research on turmeric as having similar properties, and of course, sugar is basically fuel for cancers. developing its own blood supply and kind of hijacking your body's resources. I'm curious as to what other particular food or dietary recommendations that you might employ, obviously with the idea that not every recommendation is going to be to some degree personalized, but other things that you can say pretty much across the board are good ideas for people.
Well, there's a colleague of mine who's just written a book on the metabolic approach to cancer, and she is a proponent of the ketogenic approach towards cancer nutrition. And there's a lot of research in that, but that's not who I am. And as you said, everybody gets an individualized approach. And you and I both have this ability to look at somebody's tongue and use Oriental diagnosis to see if somebody's too hot or too cold, or they're excess or deficient. So I use that as a standard foundation to where we start with people's nutrition. But there are some basic components, which is one, gluten-free for the majority of the time, and sugar-free as much as possible is critical, I think. And I want people on what I would call an anti-inflammatory diet. So it's not high in grains. It's more like a Mediterranean style approach. So it's basically 60% organic vegetables. And then there's the salmon and some meat, if people are, unless they're vegetarians. And then there's the good fats like the olive oil and the avocado. And we start our day out with a healing, healthy smoothie in which we can put a lot, in addition to the whey or the protein powder, we can put a lot of antioxidant and herbal healing support into the smoothie to attend to feeding the intestines and the body on a daily basis. So I'm not into deprivation. I don't think people are already, their whole lives have been already disrupted when they're undergoing cancer care. So I'm not into like, don't do this, don't do that so much. It's like, we have to get in touch with your inner wisdom and then make healthy choices for yourself. Notice this, 90% of the time. So if it's a holiday or if it's your birthday, and you want to decide, well, I'm either going to have a little bit of dessert or I'm going to have, a little bit of wine, but I'm not going to have pasta with wine and dessert. And then tomorrow wonder why I feel so horrible. I can't get out of bed. So there are, you'll get in touch and you'll see that 1 + 1 = 2. If I go back to the way I used to eat, I'm going to notice I don't feel well for the next couple days afterwards.
Really, really important point. I think all of that it is what we do on a day-to-day basis, what we do most of the time is the most powerful lever we have over how we're going to feel, right? Like compound habit being the most powerful, I think, thing that the most powerful force we can control.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to talk about one other thing, which is not so much about nutrition, but I think it's a really important part of recovering from a serious disease or illness, and it's cleaning out your closet. And I don't mean physically. Yes, I think everybody should go through their closet and get rid of clothes and shoes that don't fit them in energetic ways or physically anymore, and donate them to homeless women's shelters. But for relationships that aren't serving you at the highest level, cancer is a disease in which the cells don't differentiate. So I see women who come into my practice and they do everything for everyone and they don't do anything for themselves, or they don't do enough for themselves. And I think part of recovering from cancer is to do a radical 360-degree shift with that approach. And spiritually, there are some people who need to learn how to be generous. And then there are some people who it's really important that they say, no, I can't do that right now, or I'm not signing up for that extra thing, or don't ask me to walk your dog, or whatever.
Yeah, that discernment of what is essential, where should I be putting my energy from according to the inside out, as opposed to what should I be doing because someone else wants me to, or it's an expectation, or it's something that of getting a sense of accommodating things, accommodating toxins in our lives that we really shouldn't accommodate, right? Like standing up for ourselves where we need to and getting rid of the things that really aren't serving us, I think is super important, both as a preventative treatment strategy as well as especially once your immune system is challenged.
Right. You want to do a little checklist to see which ones of your friends are needing people and need you to do and expect you to do things for them versus who is giving to you. Now, if it's a 50-50 thing or if it fluctuates, sometimes that's fine. But if you're in a codependent relationship, which is not healthy for you, it's really important that you extricate yourself from that.
Yes, absolutely. I could not agree more that where being able to take time for yourself, for your self-care, is literally could mean life or death for all of us at
Yeah.
any point. And being able to recognize that this is something that drains my energy as opposed to gives me back energy. And ideally, most of our friendships are at least mutual.
They should
But
be, but not
yeah,
always.
right. And when they're not, yes, recognizing that you're allowed to take some space from that.
Mm-hmm.
Carol, this has been a really informative conversation that I think could be a really important resource for people dealing with chemo. I'm wondering, though, what else you might be working on. I know your whole practice isn't just about chemotherapy. What have you got up your sleeves?
Oh, thank you for asking. I work with a lot of different illnesses, but I think the main message I want to empower people who see me is about empowering themselves to take charge of their health and to feel positive that, okay, I have this illness. This is my spiritual path, and I'm going to do everything I can to make it as positive as possible. And one of the complex illnesses that I've been seeing a lot is about polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. And it's increasing phenomenally. Up to 15% of women of child rearing ages are being diagnosed every year. And it affects not just young girls who are just getting their periods from 12 to 13, but women in their up to women in their mid 40s. So I'm going to be doing a course in February or March on this PCOS solutions. And people can sign up on my website to be notified of when that is happening.
Awesome. I will make sure that gets into the show notes. Just so people who might not have heard of PCOS before, can you give us a quick list of
Yes,
how it might present?
I would love to. Well, you'll see as a woman, you get irregular menstruation, meaning you cannot get your period for 3 to 6 months. And you can also notice an inability to lose weight. And sometimes you'll have a pear shape. So I see women who come in and they haven't been diagnosed, but they've been on one diet after another. They haven't been able to lose weight. Of course, you always want to have your thyroid checked if that's the case. Their periods are irregular, and you can have excess hair on your body due to the increase in androgens. And then there's also blood sugar or dysglycemic component of this. And there can be a pre-diabetes or even a diabetic component. And the standard medical approach is to put women on the birth control pill to regulate their periods, and then to give them this drug that regulates their sugar. It's called metformin. And for me, as a natural medicine practitioner, that's like putting Band-Aid over a problem and saying, well, here's the Band-Aid, but we're not going to deal with anything underneath. With this birth control pill and the metformin, you will get your periods regularly, and potentially your blood sugar is regulated, but you're not dealing with any of the underlying metabolic inflammatory components of this complex disease state. And I want to help women understand what is the physiology, what's driving my illness, and then have that make it easier for them to stick to the protocol that they'll be able to work out for their body type and take the supplements and do the exercise and really do a whole health makeover, so to speak.
Well, that sounds like right there in keeping with helping people be empowered to get to the root of what's going on and to really treat in a holistic way. That sounds like an awesome resource.
Thank you.
Carol, thank you so much for being willing to come on the show today and to share with us all these excellent and powerful tips.
Oh, it was so nice to be here and talking with you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.